Hold on to your seats. We're about to discuss research design. In order to demonstrate three different research designs, quantitative approach, qualitative approach, and mixed methods approach, I will discuss and analyze three different articles that relate to outcomes in post-secondary mathematics. The first study is a quantitative design, and it's Hall and Ponton's article, Mathematics Self-Efficacy of College Freshmen. These researchers sought to identify whether or not enrollment status in developmental or college-level mathematics would impact the level of self-efficacy that students reported. In order to do this, they looked at two groups of students, a group of students in college-level calculus and a group of students in developmental algebra, and administered a self-efficacy scale to these students. This study is non-experimental in that the researchers did not manipulate the environment or pre-sort the students into sections. It's cross-sectional in design. The data were collected at a single point in time. The independent variables are categorical. They are gender and course enrollment status. And the dependent variable is a scaled variable, and it is self-efficacy. The purpose, once again, was to assess differences in self-efficacy between these two student groups. The sample method used was random cluster sampling. So rather than randomly sampling individuals, the researchers randomly sampled entire classes of students. The instrument used was Mathematics Self-Efficacy Scale, which is a pre-existing instrument. And the analysis applied included t-test, Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, Pearson product moment correlation, and ANOVA. This study had a lot of strengths in that the variables were clearly identified throughout. Multiple means of analysis were applied to the data to report results. The instrument was pre-existing, so the researchers were able to contextualize it during the literature review section as well as report on previous validity measures of the instrument. And the sample sizes of the developmental and the college level students were relatively proportionate to one another. There were some weaknesses in this study. Limitations were not specifically addressed in the body of the study. Moderating variables such as race and socioeconomic status and mediating variables such as academic preparedness or sense of belonging, I would imagine might impact the results, and I did not see these addressed by the researchers in the study. There was no reference to an internal consistency measure such as a Cronbach's alpha. And of course, there are always limitations to a non-experimental cross-sectional design in terms of being able to generalize the findings or repeat the study in a different environment and replicate the results. Next, we'll move on to the qualitative design, and this is Borum and Walker's What Makes the Difference? Black Women's Undergraduate and Graduate Experiences in Mathematics. What these researchers did in this study is they wanted to explore the experiences of 12 Black women mathematicians as they looked back and reflected on their post-secondary years. In this study, the researchers used a grounded theory approach, meaning that they combined interviews with documentary data in order to explore an abstract framework and make meaning of it from different perspectives. The sample method was purposeful sampling. Because their profile was so specific, they had to recruit and outreach to certain individuals purposefully. The instrument used were open-ended interview questions, and the theoretical framework that they were using to guide their grounded theory approach is a Black feminist framework. For analysis, they used different levels of coding to include open, axial, and selective coding. Some of the strengths of this study include detailed limitations and delimitations, so the reader has a sense of what was included and what was excluded and why. The theoretical framework, the Black feminist framework, was referenced throughout, which is especially important in a qualitative study because a lot of times the framework will influence how the researchers make meaning of the data. And the discussion surfaced independent variables and dependent variables that could be used in future research with a quantitative or a mixed methods design. There were some weaknesses in the study. The Walker dataset, which was referenced, was not contextualized or explained. There were no definitions for terms such as black woman mathematician, so it was unclear whether the participants self-identified or if they were identified by the researchers, and if so, what definitions were used. The findings may not be broadly generalized since it is a very small population in the sample, and it was unclear what they meant by documentary evidence as part of their grounded theory approach. So they referenced slices of data but did not speak to what those data were. Finally, we'll examine a mixed methods design. This is Solomon, Lawson's, and Croft's dealing with fragile identities, resistance, and refiguring in women mathematics students. What these researchers sought to do was explore the experiences of men and women students in mathematics across 3 different institutions. They wanted to see if there was a difference between the way men and women experienced their math education. Because it's mixed methods, they used both a qualitative and a quantitative approach. The qualitative approach was phenomenological. They interviewed first-year students and they used focus groups for second and third-year students to understand a shared experience at a specific point in time. Their quantitative approach was a non-experimental cross-section design in which they distributed a questionnaire with closed-ended questions on a 5-point scale to a population of students. In this quantitative design, the independent variable is gender, and the dependent variables are various dimensions of experience. For a data analysis, they used convergent parallel mixed methods, which means that one method wasn't prioritized over the other. Rather, they were reported in tandem and interwoven throughout the results and discussion. The strengths of the study is that there were multiple perspectives and sources of data throughout. It was a multi-institutional study, so the results may be more broadly generalized. The themes from the literature review paralleled through the questionnaire design, interview design, and results. The evidence and analysis was proportionate to both quantitative and qualitative methods, and the quantitative data was displayed in table form. I did observe some weaknesses in the study. The process for sampling and recruiting study participants was unclear. The process for coding or theming the qualitative data was unclear. So they mentioned that they were looking for patterns but didn't talk about how they defined those patterns or identified those patterns. And no information about the questionnaire instrument, including the internal consistency measures, is actually provided in the body of the study. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me discussing research design. If you reference the annotated PDFs included as part of the submission, you can find more detailed notes on the characteristics of the studies.